Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the new S3D Sidekick Podcast series. I'm Will Lehman, your podcast host and senior sales engineer at S3D Sidekick. I'm thrilled you decided to join on by either watching or listening, and I hope you find this podcast interesting and learn something new. At S3D, one of our goals is to bridge the gap between technology and data acquisition to data application to help provide actionable insights to coaches and athletes to help them improve in performance and reduce the risk of injury. So we wanted to start this podcast series as a way of starting the conversation and exploring the world of technology and biomechanics and sports performance. So whether you're a sports or exercise scientist, biomechanist, or just someone passionate about sports technology, we hope you find this interesting. Throughout this podcast series, we'll be diving into a wide range of topics from the basics of what a force plate is, breaking down the phases of a counter movement jump, to discussing more cutting edge applications like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and motion capture. Today, as we kick off the series, I'll be joined by our newest colleague here at S3D, John Crosby. John comes to S3D with over 10 years of experience at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee as one of their sports performance biomechanists. He has a track record of working with over 50 medalists, including 3 world record performances. John holds a master's in exercise science from SUNY Cortland and is a certified strength and conditioning specialist by the NSCA. So for the first episode, we'll discuss our backgrounds, how we ended up here, our experiences in the world of biomechanics and sports performance. So grab your headphones, settle in, and enjoy.
Welcome to the S3D Sidekick Podcast series for biomechanics and sports performance. Join us as we dive in and discuss the latest cutting-edge technology and research as we will connect with industry experts and sports scientists. Follow and subscribe.
Hey, so as we start this podcast today and in general, I wanted to kind of start off by giving a background on myself and kind of introduce you to me. We'll introduce you to John, and then also we'll kind of get into a little bit of the background behind the S3D. So to start off, I grew up on Long Island in New York. I played sports throughout my growing up. Throughout high school, I played football, I ran track, and I played lacrosse. Where eventually I went on to then play lacrosse at SUNY Plattsburgh, where I did my undergraduate in physics. And I was always interested in science and in sports, but I didn't really have a intro into biomechanics at all. So I was always trying to figure out how can I put the two together. The only intro I kind of did have was in high school. I had an injury where I was running, my gait was all off, and I was running with a limp, and I had to go see a exercise physiologist. And it was the first time I experienced seeing somebody where they had a method behind their weightlifting or their programming, not just going to the weight room with my football team and there's some programming, but it's very general and never really individualized. So I saw this exercise physiologist. He kind of knew exactly what was going on with me. We did some stretching, we did some mobility work, and then we worked on some strength. And he was able to fix my gait, and I was able to then run and correctly and actually get my athletic career back on path. Because for a while there, it didn't look good. I went from being a starter to being a bench player after my injury. But once it got fixed, I was able to get back on the starting lineup. So in my undergraduate, while I was doing physics, I'm playing lacrosse. I didn't really know what I was going to do after I graduated. So I just started doing my junior year end of it. My friends were starting to get jobs and kind of land or figure out at least exactly what direction they wanted to go, whether it be law school or doing an MBA or something. I wasn't really sure. So I just started Googling, how can I put physics in sports engineering, all this different stuff. Ended up finding a master's program out of Sheffield Hallam University in England that was called sports engineering. It was a 1-year master's. So I figured, you know what, this sounds pretty cool. Sounds like kind of directly up my alley. After I looked, did a little bit more research, looked into it a little more, I decided I was going to apply. And I applied, and 2 weeks later, I got my acceptance letter. So I was super excited, went over to England, was there for a year, did my master's, Learned a bunch of really cool stuff. It was exactly what I thought it was going to be. It was all about applying physics and engineering into sports equipment, sports technology. So we learned about the aerodynamics of ball flight. We learned about fluid dynamics in swimming, fluid dynamics when riding a bike. We learned about different technologies like force plates, EMG sensors, motion capture, GPS, how all this technology works. And it was super interesting, super cool. And I was fortunate enough to then do my master's thesis with the International Tennis Federation, where they wanted to come up with a court rating system for their hard surfaces. Classically, guys were always sliding on the clay and grass surfaces, but not so much on the hard surface that you would see at like the U.S. Open until these guys like Djokovic, Nadal, Federer started coming around, sliding on these surfaces and winning. So there was some concern by the International Tennis Federation that every acrylic court is not the same. It can range in different friction depending on how the paint and whatever materials laid down to make the court. So my project was part of a bigger project to kind of determine if the International Tennis Federation can come up with a court rating system, so people would be able to know, okay, this is a high friction court. I'm gonna have to adjust my playing style compared to like maybe a home court or a different court they usually play out with a lower friction where they're more easy to slide. They wanted to do this to avoid potential injury risks. So I used a motion analysis motion capture system along with Kistler force plates. And we had 3 different surfaces ranging in friction. I had about 10 to 20 athletes come in and do a 180-degree turn to try to induce a slide. So their pivot foot was landing on that force plate and then coming out of the turn. So what we found was that nothing, their biomechanics determined everything. It wasn't really the friction. I mean, that could be because the friction levels didn't range enough, but we found out that it really depended on their biomechanics. And this is kind of where my then really started to pique my interest in biomechanics is, how people move and how people interact with their surroundings and in the ground really determine their outcomes or their performance. Some people maybe they might be super strong or might have a gift in a certain level, but maybe they're not using the mechanics correctly, or they're not sliding when they should, or they are sliding when they shouldn't. And so that really interests me. So from there, I kind of was like, okay, I was thinking about using biomechanics and doing some R&D type of stuff, whether it be like shoe design or equipment design. After I graduated my master's, I didn't have a job lined up again and was kind of in this middle land where I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I have this master's degree, but I didn't know what job or position and direction I wanted to go. So I ended up moving back to Long Island, getting a job in construction, and just continued to kind of go for different interviews and try to land a position. Eventually, I got recruited by Motion Analysis. They were hiring for a sales position. And although I wasn't really into sales or wasn't expecting on doing that, I decided I'll take the interview. I'll go see what it's like and see what happens. And actually, it was really eye-opening about the different projects you're involved with in sales. It's not just, trying to convince somebody to buy a product, but it's more of like you're really solving a solution or providing a solution and solving a problem for somebody. So I really like that idea. Could use my undergraduate degree in physics and problem solving to my master's degree in sports engineering and using this technology for whatever it be, research or to improve performance. So I didn't end up getting the job at Motion Analysis, but Kistler also had a job opening at the same time, and they had it for a biomechanics application specialist. I ended up getting that job, and the only stipulation was that I had to move from New York to Michigan. And so I decided, I'll go out there for 2 years, check it out, see if I like it, see if it's for me, and ended up now it's almost 10 years later, and I'm still in Michigan, and I'm married with now a 1.5-year-old and another baby on the way. So I'm here indefinitely. But I was at Kistler for 8.5 years. I enjoyed my time there, did a ton of traveling, met a lot of great people, really enjoyed the market, being part of this biomechanics market, working with other vendors or different clients and prominent people within this field. It was really interesting. The opportunity to work for S3D came up. I decided my time at Kistler was kind of over, and this would be a great opportunity to kind of take my connections, take my knowledge for the past 10 years, 8.5 years that I had at Kistler, and apply it to in a new way. So I joined the S3D team back in June of 2023. And it's been great. As I mentioned in the intro, I really find that bridging the gap between this technology and applying it so athletes can, and applying the data so athletes can then get better insights in how they move and how they can improve their performance is super valuable. And it's a growing market. It's a growing field. Sports analytics is growing in general. So it's an exciting time to be a part of this market. But I will say one of the things when I was at Kistler, I had the pleasure of meeting John, who's our guest today. And John was at the U.S. Paralympic Committee. I went out to San Diego and the training spot in Chula Vista. That's when we initially met and kind of had been in touch throughout probably for 5-6 years and seeing each other at different conferences, whether ASB or ACSM meetings or NSCA. So we've always stayed in touch. And then so I was super happy to learn that he was joining the team. And I know that he comes with a wealth of knowledge and connections and has an awesome background. So we're both SUNY guys. So he went to SUNY Cortland, I went to SUNY Plattsburgh. So we want to represent the state of New York with our team as well. So yeah, super happy to have you, John. And if you wanted to kind of just dive in and give a brief background on yourself and kind of go in what you did with the USOPC. And I'll take it from there.
Yeah. Thanks, Will. I mean, like Will said, ran into him a couple times, different conferences, whatnot, when I was with the U.S. Olympic Committee. We had some Kistler force plates, so I had to pick his brain from here and there, figure out how to get things to work. Similar to Will, actually, I'm from upstate New York, real true upstate New York, from Saratoga area. I went to undergrad at SUNY Cortland, SUNY Oneonta, grad school at SUNY Cortland. SUNY Oneonta, I was biology and chemistry, pre-physical therapy, and then realized I hated it my senior year and didn't want to work in a lab, so ended up getting a master's degree in something. So it was around the time I started getting into lifting and wanted to find the best way to spend my time doing that to get the most out of it. So I really got into exercise science and found a master's program that focused on that and biomechanics, which I was always interested in. So went to SUNY Cortland for that, and one thing led to another. Ended up getting an internship with USA Boxing after my time there. And then, ended up with the Olympic Committee for the last 9 years. So time really does fly. It's also worth mentioning back at undergrad and grad school, I ended up playing tennis for 2 years and then volleyball, club volleyball the rest of the time. So always been very big into sports myself. In my time with the Olympic Committee, I was a sport performance technologist. So essentially my job was to take the tech that we had, set it up for the athletes and coaches, collect all the data, and then package it and give it back to them with some key takeaways. I mostly worked with the throwers and jumpers for track and field. But during my time there, I worked with canoe and kayak, BMX, track cycling, kind of all over the place a bit. When I got the offer to come to S3D about a month ago, it seemed like a great opportunity, so I hopped on it and been here about 2 weeks now. So, yeah, it's been great so far.
Yeah, nice. It's been great to have you on the team. When you were working with the athletes at the USOC, what kind of technology were you using? And you mentioned you worked with the throwers and then the canoers, and were you doing biomechanics type stuff, or was it more physiology? What kind of technology were you using? What kind of feedback were you giving these athletes?
Yeah, great question. So the group I worked the most with were the throwers. So with that, we used TrackMan and FlightScope to get all the projectile data. So set it up behind the ring. It would get release angle, velocity, distance, release height, basically everything you need to know projectile wise. And the big thing for them is they don't really see what's happening outside of distance. So getting them those numbers and then talking to them from a physics standpoint about well, maybe a 45-degree angle isn't the best for shot put. Or maybe you're throwing at 27 degrees. Let's get that number up a little bit, and here's why. So it was a lot of discussions like that, and then tracking over time by tracking everything, and then giving the athletes the numbers and the coaches the numbers. They're able to correlate it back to the training program in the gym and see what training's working for people, what's not. So it was a lot of that. For canoe and kayak, it was mostly I was the camera guy and the dartfish guy. So be filming everything and then organizing it, and then if athlete A wants to go and watch what happened at what venue to see what how the water kind of flowed, they could go and they could watch it. Or they want to watch this person in the prelims to see what path they took through the water, they could go through and watch it quickly instead of sorting through everything. Instead of just having it, I would bookmark it, cut the video up, put it together. So.
Nice. How often were the athletes at the Chula Vista training site, or did you have to go out to see the athletes usually during their training? How did that work?
Yeah. Great question. So at first it was only once a week, if that. But slowly over
they would
time,
come to you once a week?
No, so the shot putters were based out of Chula Vista, and I was living there too. So they were out there every single day with Coach Art Venegas. So I worked with Joe Kovacs, Ryan Krauser, some of the best shot putters I've ever been, really. We were lucky enough to have them at the training center. But Art Venegas was a very salt of the earth kind of coach. So he didn't really believe in technology to begin with, didn't want distraction during practice. So we had this TrackMan that we had worked with to set up for the group, because you typically there for baseball or golf. We had worked with them, developed it, set it up. So when I started back in 2015, I would go out, set it up maybe once a week, if that. But by going and setting it up and never interrupting practice, always being seen and not heard, and then adding value to what they were getting. So I was always there to answer any question, but I wasn't telling them to start, stop, hooking them up to anything. I wasn't even talking unless spoken to during the practices. So by taking that kind of approach, I was able to get bought in and be an addition. So then they wanted me to come down more and more often. And it got to the point where I was down there 5 days a week, just always out in the field. So it slowly grew over time, but definitely learned a lot of life lessons from it. So.
Nice. Yeah, it's. I feel like, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but U.S. Olympic sports, or I should say Olympic sports in the U.S., how the athletes train and prepare for the Olympics is, I feel, much different from a lot of other countries. Even from the Canadian sports, or my experience in the UK is that they have these training centers that they kind of breed these athletes from a young age, where they, a kid shows potential, and then they have a wide net of athletes that show potential, and then they kind of bring them up, and hopefully that, one of them can become medal in the Olympics, or kind of they get paid, they get their education, everything is done based on their Olympic sport. And it's I think it's in the UK, I might be wrong, but I think it's mostly governments supported and funded. Where in the US we have that, but kids go to IMG Academy, or there's a couple other the Inspire Academy in Ohio, a couple other places where kids would go, but that's all private. And a lot of these athletes are true stars of the Olympics. For the US team, they have their own private gyms that they usually train out, or private coach, and then they'll get some input from the USOPC from time to time. That's kind of how I thought. I think it goes, but you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a mix of things. So,
it probably depends on the sport or athlete and how famous.
For sure. So the big the big thing is the U.S. Olympic Committee, Olympic and Paralympic Committee. They don't get any government funding whatsoever, whereas every other country, every big country does. So like Great Britain, like UK, they're sponsored by the lottery, like things like that. Whereas the US has none of that. It's only sponsors. So all the money they have is from like Visa, Delta, Nike, all the big companies. So that's one of the big reasons why. I mean, we're lucky in the US that our culture is so based around sports that we don't really have to have the specific programs as much as maybe other countries do, because we I don't know, we bring up sports so much. We always, like, kids' dreams are to be professional athletes, right? Like that's very much our culture. So we have that all the time. And then the NCAA system is the closest thing we have to it. So we get so many of our athletes coming through there, like honing their skills, developing. The NCAA system is huge for the Olympic athletes for the U.S. The Olympic and Paralympic Committee has a couple of training sites where they would basically fill them with like sports medicine, sport performance staff, and have certain athletes come and train if they were at a certain level to help give them support. They've seemed to kind of go away from that approach more and more over the years. And to be honest, most of the athletes have gone back to their college coaches even after. So like a shot putter after he's done, or hammer thrower after he's done, and wants to, with his NCAA career, and wants to keep going and try to be an Olympian. A lot of times he'll stay with the coach, either be an assistant coach, find another job in the area, and keep training at the facility. There's a lot of that kind of happens. So the athletes are so scattered in general. Obviously, it depends on the sport. Like, you can't be a skier and snowboarder and be in Florida, really, right?
Yeah, and
you've
hanging
got
on Boca Raton.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be somewhere appropriate. So it's a weird mix of training sites, training facilities like Lake Placid and Colorado Springs, and people just going to individual private ones, going with their colleges, their college coaches, or finding a private, like another, just going to like a public school, even some of them have to do. So it's really just a wide mix of strategies there.
Yeah. It's always interested me, like, ever since going my time, I'm doing my master's in England, and seeing how sports and sport club and like the culture difference from living there and participating in sports there to what it is here in the US. It's really interesting to me. Like, so in England, every city or town, they have like a club, and then they have all sports within that club. And most clubs have definitely the popular sports in England, like whether it be, cricket, soccer, football, if you want to call it, rugby. They definitely have all those sports, and then they have every age level and then skill level on top of that. So, and then it's affiliated with where you live, and so you can play up until you want to stop playing. Where in the US, we have our high school sports, which are a huge part of our culture. And then we have, if you're good enough to then play in college, you can play. And that's another big part of our culture. But if you're not good enough to play in college, most people just stop participating in sports. And then if you're not good enough to go professional, which the only, 0.1% do, after sports in college, I mean, there's maybe some club here and there that you can participate in, but most people just stop playing. And that's kind of where I found myself too. Where in England, I played lacrosse for our local Sheffield team. And then also I played for the university team. And the skill level was way different. The university team, these were kids that, hey, it was more of a club sport at the university level. Like, I want to go out, I want to play a sport, want to have some fun. I mean, obviously lacrosse is not a huge sport over in England, so the skill level was pretty low. Where the club lacrosse team, like, these were guys that they've played lacrosse from they were 5-6 years old, and they've kind of come up, and so the skill level was a lot better. So it's the stark contrast between, okay, most sports in the UK at the college level are club, Or in the U.S., it's the NCAA. It's super intense. I mean, like obviously athletes are now getting paid through the NIL deals, and it's like a second job to go into school. But the trade-off is that there's nothing else after it. When I played lacrosse, I was playing guys in the UK. Some guys were in their 50s that were still playing. And it's, usually have practice, a couple nights a week, and then you play games on the weekends. And that was a big part of their culture, which I thought was really cool, really interesting. One of the things I was going to say is that they have like free healthcare. I'm not sure exactly how it goes, but whether it's free or it's supplemented by the government. The government has an interest in keeping their population healthy, and this was actually something that was kind of taught to me when I was there too, because if they get more people involved in sports and playing, then the overall population is going to be healthier, and they don't have to spend. They're not going to spend the same amount of money on healthcare. So they incentivize people to go out and play, or they either not incentivize people to go out and play, but they at least set up leagues and provide the opportunity for people to play. And like there was a park at like right down the road from where I lived, and they threw a 5K every weekend. And every weekend at 9 o'clock, there was a 5K race. It lasted, an hour, and by 10 o'clock, everyone's gone. But every weekend, I can go down and run a 5K, and they tracked it, they timed it, so like they made it competitive. So all the other 5K races going around England, you can compare yourself, find out where you fall, track your progress. So that was like something really cool that I don't see really existing in the U.S. And maybe it does in some pockets here and there, but it was very much like, hey, you can get involved and you can compare yourself to everybody across England, and it's very much organized where, this town's playing this town, refs are paid, and it's all organized. There's fields to play on, which I think it was interesting. And I would love to see the US do a better job of that, because when I came back and I moved to Michigan, not really, I'm like, so Long Island is a hotbed for lacrosse, and upstate New York is, and maybe some places in Maryland, but Michigan's not really known. There was one lacrosse league. I was 40 minutes away from where I lived. And so I played, but I didn't make it all the time. It was one night a week. It wasn't very competitive. And so I just kind of, I right now, if I lived in England, I could still play lacrosse. For now, I'm not. And, I would love to. Maybe not now, because I've got my hands tied with my family. But so yeah, I thought that was interesting, and how it kind of relates to Olympic athletes, and how like it's so niche. Like if you're good at shot put, there's not much competition until every 4 years, until the Olympics come around. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, there's probably the World Games, but internal within the U.S., I feel like you really look for those 4 years for the Olympics, where if another country like the UK, like you can go out and compete every weekend in a competitive setting.
To an extent, I mean, with like the Olympic shot putters, I mean, the U.S. is the strongest in the world by far. Like
maybe shot put's not a good example.
Yeah, shot put's the wrong one, but in general, like the Olympic athletes tend to make their money. Like it's not like they just sit around every like 3 years, and then every fourth year they're like, oh, I need to do that. Most of the time, they have different competitions set up by USA Track and Field. There's little ones here and there. Then there's the Diamond League in Europe. But most of the stuff is, like you said, kind of in Europe. So a lot of times they've got to make their way over there to compete, to get their world ranking. Like in order to qualify for the Olympics, even to qualify for like trials, you need to have like a certain standard. Track and field's nice because you get a specific number. It's like, well, I need to throw this much. I need to run this speed. I need to you're competing against a number, as opposed to something like tennis, right? Where it's like, well, I need to go against this player, and they derive numbers from that. But this is like an exact number. Like I need to throw this far. I need to have this world ranking to qualify. And then at Olympic trials, I need to be top 3 with those qualifications, and then I'm going. Like they make it very streamlined in that way. So a lot of times they are competing. I think Ryan Krauser, the two-time gold medalist, just said that he said something in effect of like the U.S. field is so densely packed with good athletes for shot put that it's far more competitive than the Olympic Games is right now, which is crazy. But I mean, it's for a guy who's broken the world record as many times as he has and won back-to-back gold medals, I kind of believe him. So, it's a shot put especially is a very interesting sport, like the throws in general, because so much of it's based around strength and power. And strength is just something that you need to build over time. Like there's not really shortcuts. Like obviously you've got freaks who are like benching 400 or 500 pounds in high school, college, or whatever it is. But typically to get to that next level, like you need to have a lot of time. Like all the shot putters that I've seen, I believe the golden number that I was told by our strength and conditioning coach with the USOPC was the people that did well, like got that 22-meter mark, all of them, I believe, benched at least 500 pounds and squatted at least 700, I think. He said that was like the bare minimum. Obviously, there's guys that do more, like Joe Kovacs. I've seen that guy bench 700 pounds for the week of competition. Like there's obviously physical freaks like that, but you need like time to build to that level of strength. Like Joe wasn't doing that in high school. I mean, if it just takes years and years of the right programming, the right progressive overload to get to that point. So, they definitely, I think, need some more support than what they have in order to, like, they need the facilities. Because if you're just trying to go right into the Olympics from NCAA, like, you don't have that 3, 4, 5 years of extra strength building to, like, really get your base down. So, shot put's definitely an interesting one.
There's not much opportunity for people to train unless, like, and there's not much money in it. So if you're 21, 22, and you have to make it, and you're at the top of your craft or whatever sport you're doing, and you graduate college, you have to decide, okay, I'm going to go full in for the next Olympics and train and fundraise and try to get money, or it's like, or I just go to law school and become a lawyer, start my life. That's what that reminds me of when I first started with Kistler. We had our swim start system, which was a starting block with force plates integrated with 5 high-speed video cameras, and all built to go on the pool deck, go in the pool and capture up to the first 20 meters of a swim start. And so it was a product that they were really trying to push when I started. So I did a bunch of research and contacted a bunch of people in swimming. And this was before the 2016 Olympics were coming up. And we landed at a spot. It was a Swim Mac swim club, which was down in South Carolina. And they trained out of Queen's University. And so to kind of promote the system in the US and get exposure, we said, we'll go down there and we'll install the system at no cost for exposure to different athletes and coaches to really get a hand, see the system and get kind of hands-on experience with it. And that really opened me up to this idea of Olympics sports and the Olympic sports in the US and swimming. And now, like what you mentioned before, shot put is the competition in the US is shot put is more competitive than the Olympics. The same thing for swimming. Like only the top 2 swimmers in the US for each event go. And when we were at the US trials, that was the big thing. Everyone's like, the US Olympic trials in swimming is more competitive than the actual Olympics. We don't get gold in every event in swimming, but we have 3, 4 athletes that have the potential to medal, where I think that's more unique than where maybe a country has maybe 1 or 2. We have like a list of people that can probably medal in every event, but only the top 2 from the trials go. But yeah, so it was interesting because the swimmers there, they were the Swim Mac Elite. They were post college. They went to Michigan or Auburn. They were swimming at these big universities, and then they had to make the decision. Okay, I'm gonna go on full on train and swim every day and train for the Olympics, or I stop and go or I couldn't make practice because I have to work at my Lululemon job, which I thought was super interesting. These were, unless you were like Ryan Lochte, who actually trained there, and I got to experience like hands on with, like they were just normal people. Like, yeah, I'm trying to make the Olympics, and they were like the top of their craft, which was so interesting to me. And then some of them that trained, they committed their life and they got a stipend for food or whatever for maybe the U.S. Olympic Committee, to train, but then didn't end up making the Olympics. So then not they wasted time, but it was really, you could see like the emotion and the heartbreak that they had, that they put, they post college, putting all their effort into making the Olympics. Like, this has been their life. And then you don't make the Olympic team, if you don't make it at the trials, then what? Your whole identity has been the sport your whole life, probably from a young age, all throughout high school. You're top of your craft in high school. You're a top athlete for swimming. You make it to the Olympics or the NCAAs, and you're at the top there. And then you're training for the Olympics, and then you don't make it. And it's kind of like, okay, well, now what? Do I wait 4 years? Do I kind of do the competitions before then? There's not much money in it, or do I just start my career? So that's kind of what was interesting. I was going to say, one of the really cool things from that experience down at Queen's University, where we installed the swimming system, was we worked with Anthony Irvin. So Anthony Irvin split the gold medal in Sydney in 2000, and I think he was like 18, and he won the 50-meter freestyle. And he's like renowned as knowing, like, having one of the fastest swimmers. And then after he won gold, I think he found himself in this spot of like, I'm 18 or 19, whatever it was. He's reached the pinnacle or the peak of his success, and he kind of, I feel like, maybe lost himself a little bit. I think there was a story where he was like running from the police and maybe even committed suicide or tried to commit suicide attempt, and kind of a tragic story. He sold his gold medal. But he sold his gold medal to raise money for the people in Indonesia after the tsunami. So this was, going back a while back. And then he made a comeback in 2016. And so he goes through this whole like kind of period of his life. He kind of reconnects with swimming and decides he's going to commit to try to make the Olympics again. And he's trained at SwimMac, and we helped him with his start, the swim system. And he ended up making the Olympic team. I think in trials he got second, made it to the finals at the Olympics, and then won gold again. After it was 16 years later, he won gold again. And that was kind of a really cool experience of watching him, like, okay, train, use our system, use this technology, knowing, okay, what best placement to push my foot, how high should I, put his butt up in the air before he takes off in the start, how deep and he enters the water. He was able to use this technology in our system to kind of make these small adjustments to help improve his start, and then ended up winning gold at the Olympics, which was really cool. And then for a period of time, we sponsored him, I think, at Kistler. We gave him, wrote him a check, and then we were able to use his image, and he gave us like a reference and a quote we could use about using the system. So that was really cool. To see him use the technology, win gold, and be successful, especially after doing it when he was 18 or 19 in 2000 and come back and doing it again in 2016.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, where all the technology is now, it's getting so much better. I mean, you don't have to like go hand by hand and digitize everything, spend hours and hours. It's like the tech is getting crazy. I mean, back with my time with the Olympic Committee, like, we were pretty understaffed, I'd say, for the biomechanics side. Like, I was one of two total. So we couldn't do much outside of kind of learn tech and rely on it. We couldn't do a lot of stuff by hand or whatnot. But the things, like, that was part of the reason that S3D kind of interested me, right? Is I definitely saw it with my time with the Olympic Committee, that having a way to optimize the processes, and like basically just having tech talk to each other better, and then having the reports come out easier would have been huge for me. Like, I was running, like, I had an Optigate system for for gait analysis for our sprinters. Like I had like TrackMan and TrackMan and FlightScope for the projectile data. I did some drone videography too to get overhead angles. Like we had like a laser to get like instantaneous velocity of someone running. So we could track like their acceleration curve. We had a lot of different pieces of tech that none of them really talk to each other. So I was packaging individual reports, sending them out. Whereas if we had something into like one dashboard to put it in, like, and we tried doing some stuff with athlete management systems, but it was definitely an uphill climb that not a lot of us had the time for between me and the other practitioners. So yeah, something like S3D definitely would have come in handy. So that's part of the reason I was drawn here. I'm sure your reasoning was similar. So yeah, do you want to kind of get into a little bit of what we do at S3D and how it can impact an organization?
Yeah, good segue. For sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, when at the time at Kistler, force plates were when I first started, they were kind of just starting to really become prominent in sports performance. Sparta Science was kind of just starting with Dr. Phil Wagner, as well as Peak Performance Project, P3, with Dr. Marcus Elliott, where these two guys were kind of the pioneers in using force plates to measure athletes and using technology. I think at Sparta, they kind of took the force plate approach and try to really dumb it down, because this technology can be really complex from the different types of force plates. Like at Kistler, we had piezoelectric, and if you go to Bertec or AMTI, the other two main systems, or even Vald or Hawkins, now they use strain gauge. So it's a different technology. So your output is going to be, of your data is going to be different. So if you just were a strength coach and you wouldn't really understand the technology. So Sparta, they kind of try to dumb it down and make it as simple as possible, and just like, here's 3 metrics you get, and it's usually load, drive, and explode, something that athletes, coaches can relate to. So I always thought that was interesting, of like, okay, let's take something complex and dumb it down, but then you're also limiting that technology to something being like simplifying it, where there's so much more value added to like information that you can get from a force plate than just these 3 metrics. Now, I understand they want to make it simple for people, but if there was a way that somebody can visualize the data and see, okay, what is your concentric rate force development? No one, someone off the street's not going to know that, but if they can visualize it with a force time curve, which is another thing someone's not going to be able to understand just from coming off the street and look at it. Looking at a force time, where they're not going to understand what's going on. But if you're able to reference a video with that data, I think that's big. And that's kind of one of the things, one of the core things at S3D is that we want to bridge the gap between this technology and the complexities of it to a strength coach or an athlete to really understand their data, understand what it's telling them, and how they can either make improvements to their training to help improve their performance, or if they need to change, maybe adjust their training to reduce their risk of injury. So I think we've really done a great job with that, with markerless motion technology, with force plates, EMG data, any type of integrating, whether it be a wearable sensor or GPS or any other type of data, and then putting in a platform where people can easily visualize. That's something I think we could add a lot of value. It's still as this market is growing, as technology becomes more advanced, it can one way simplify things, but also complicate things in another area. So another thing we try to do is simplify data collection. We try to manage your data so it doesn't become overwhelming, or help you manage your data so it's not overwhelming. We try to set up different processes, build different tools, so it's as easy as clicking a button, and then you're not spending time trying to figure out how to get everything integrated, how to shuffle through the data, how to pull different phase images to relate to different data points and key performance indicators or KPIs. We try to streamline that process as simple as possible, so we can build custom tools and provide like a boutique service to the athletes, to the coaches, to be able to properly use their data to then see actionable insights and then also use the data to make actionable changes in their training or the performance. All right, so as we wrap up today's episode, I just want to thank you for joining us. If you're still listening, cheers to you. So yeah, we covered a lot, or a decent amount about my background, John's background, and kind of different experiences we had in our time in this biomechanics world and sports performance world. So yeah, thanks John for joining. And if you found the information interesting or you got any questions or want to learn more about S3D, feel free to reach out to us on our social media channels. You can also email us at info@s3dsidekick.com. You should be able to just kind of search S3D Sidekick on all social media channels to find us, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I think we probably post the most on LinkedIn and Instagram. But feel free to ask any questions, reach out if you want to learn more. And to end it.
No, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for listening in. Will, thanks for setting this all up. And looking forward to working with any of you guys who listen to this and who find this interesting and reach out to us.
Yeah, and we'll continue to keep this series going. So the plan is to have researchers or people within the market either to explain their product or their research or anything new, interesting that's going on. We want to discuss it. So be on the lookout for those episodes coming out.